Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Um, my apologies for the late start. I had a couple of technical issues, but it appears that everything else is running smoothly. Some of you may notice over here my hey, elusive man, how's it going, my friend? I was about to say, some of you may notice here that there are pieces missing from the suit of armor. That is because s- in the middle of the night, the Bowie, it's not a poster, it's literally a humongous chunk of like lucite or something. It's a big plastic thing. It's matched by my Hendrix, which is on metal, but it came off the wall. One of the nails must have come loose and it fell, knocked the suit of armor to the floor at about 2 in the morning while I was asleep. So you can imagine my reaction when I half heard the commotion because obviously it was mid-sleep, and since I was half asleep, I was thinking to myself, like, the aquarium broke or I'm underwater or whatever, like I was thinking I'm in some kind of a pressure situation and there is a wall breaching somewhere. So it was quite interesting, but I'll get him back on his feet properly. Sir Galahad, I've decided. I realized that when I was putting him back upright and hanging the stupid Bowie picture, which is now permanently bent on one corner, which I'm not very pleased with because it's an original piece of art and now it's damaged. But what can you do? At least from the front, it doesn't look too bad. Um, Butters, hey Butters, and Warren and Vince, yeah, how's it going, everybody? But yeah, so I wanted to go into the topic of you know collecting smartwatches. And I was thinking the only parallel I could find, because a smartwatch is not a horological device, right? Someone who is collecting watches may collect smartwatches, but smartwatch to me is an intelligent wearable whose secondary functionality is to tell the time. That's why I got a, smart ring. I have the Samsung smart ring because it lets me wear whatever watch I want, and it does 90% of what a smartwatch does. And, wristwatch check, I'm wearing my, silver Snoopy on, a metal bracelet that I had to buy after because it comes on a sailcloth. I think they do that so you can easily open it to see the back. But the people I show it to are smart enough to look around the bracelet. But I am glad I bought the metal bracelet because it's the latest generation, which has micro adjust. It's more like the one click that Rolex has offered forever, but this is at least elegantly done. It's a nice. It's a well executed bracelet. Let's put it that way, and it's a very comfortable bracelet to wear. But so let's go into that topic of collecting smartwatches and smart devices, right? Hey, Eric, how's it going? Santa Claus, Chris, we got to hang out. And in fact, next week I'm going to come out to Frankfurt and we're going to hang out. Hell or high water, I promise. And the watch club hasn't gotten back to me yet, but Butter says they don't own a smartwatch, never plan to. I actually had the first generation Moto 360, because as a tech journalist, I wanted to at least understand it with use. I didn't want to be the one to. I may comment on something, but if I comment on anything, I'll have at least some handle on it to where I could inform on it intelligently. And so I bought a Moto 360 and I used it for a while, and I actually liked it to one degree, but to another degree, I already have a decent phone. I didn't need a terminal for my phone on my wrist because that's what a smartwatch is. Yes, there are people who use it for exercising and tracking, but now there are rings. Now, previously there weren't. So, but now there's no excuse not to switch over to a smart ring and then wear a real watch again. But no, I can appreciate people who, and there are people who use them for other things. Like I have a friend who is I used to golf, but I have a friend who's a golfer, and he uses his Garmin for his golfing, the distances and all of the other stuff. So I can respect and understand people who like and use smart watches. But to me, like I said, they're not smart watches, they're intelligent wearables where timekeeping is a secondary functionality. Because, like my friend who's using it for his golf game, he's not using it to tell time between holes, right? He's using it to gauge distances. He's using it for wind or weather or whatever. I don't even know what the Garmin tells you nowadays. Probably all of the above if you are willing to go through it. But he's not using that smart watch to tell time, to track his running or track her jogs or track his lifting or track their um, efforts in whatever relations, be it golf or hang gliding or something else that requires GPS coordinates and the like. Those are all functionalities that have nothing to do, in one sense, everything to do with timekeeping because GPS location is based on time. And a lot of these functionalities are based on time, but you can determine north and south from a watch with hands, but a smartwatch will be a little bit more accurate. But then again, you're not using it to tell the time. You're using it to tell you where you are or how far the next hole is or whatever, what your heart rate is, how many steps you've taken. So in my mind, I put that in the context of technology collection. And that is a legitimate avenue. And I'm a technology collector. And I thought, let's go through my collection of weird technology. And there are some smart watches that would fall into some of these categories, right? So, category one, something cool and classic that is now relatively rare, but if you hunted, you could find one. And that's the Atari Portfolio. This is an Atari Portfolio. I actually used this as a device to take notes and do spreadsheets and all, because this was a complete IBM AT compatible. This was the first IBM PC compatible portable computer. It actually has an RS-232 port, old school RS-232 port in the side. You could plug it into a printer. And so as computers go, this was a completely functional computer, and it had physical keys, so you can actually type on it, and I did. The display is microscopic, but then again, my Osborne 1 had a 4-inch display. Us old computer dudes had to put up with a lot. So this is collectible because it represents a legitimate stepping stone in our technological advancement as a society, right? So this is collectible technology. In one sense, some people may disagree, but I like to think it is. I mean, Atari Portfolio, and uh, it's literally the size of an old VHS cassette. So, and it ran on 3 runs on 3 AA batteries. And like I said, I used it when I was a field sales manager for the distributor for Anheuser-Busch in Germany back in the late 9 80s, late 80s, right around the cusp of the end of the Cold War. I have a award on my wall from the USO for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the parties I threw as a bud guy on Rhine Mine Air Base. So that's one aspect of technology collection, something that represents a significant aspect. So, like, for example, if I had held on to that Moto 360, that was a first generation smartphone, that would be a legitimate collectible. You could argue as a watch as well, because it was the first one of the first smart watches. And second, it was, yeah, a significant advance in our electronic journey, as it were, evolution. One of the first round color screens in the mass production. And then there's the tech that was never to be, right? This is an Elusite. And if you notice, it's already deteriorating inside. You could see it's deteriorating inside the device. And this was a digital liquid crystal on silicon device. Now, this is an example of a technology that was developed, created, commercialized, but never fielded. So this, I'm holding about $2 billion of research in my hand that never made it to the marketplace because liquid crystal on silicon was considered a viable alternative to digital light processing, which is the Texas Instruments technology, which is still used today everywhere, because that is a MEMS technology. It is a micromechanical machine. So if you think of the DLP technology is what they use in projectors and the like. It's a rel at our optical level, it's a flat surface, and if you it's a mirror, and if you shine light on it, a picture comes off of it. And in the Texas Instruments case, it's because there are millions of microscopic mirrors that pivot, and they can reflect the light in different angles, so you can shoot different lasers or LEDs or whatever at it and have an image come off of it. And liquid crystal on silicon, they thought would be a competitive technology because it was using the exact same technology or philosophy of millions of microscopic mirrors, but instead of being mechanical mirrors, they were liquid crystal mirrors. But the problem with that was, since it was a planar surface, there was zero margin for error. It had to be mounted perfectly or it wouldn't function properly. Whereas the Texas Instruments device that is still used today has like a 2 to 3 degree swing on each side, which means you can have a relatively wide mechanical installation and it would still function because the margin of error is much broader because the device has a much wider angle of acceptance, whereas the liquid crystal on silicon did not. So it was a great technology, but it could not be cost effectively assembled into televisions. And so it didn't work. And that's why that's collectible, right? Now, then there's like just antique collectible technology, like this old light meter, as if anybody needs a completely separate light meter now, except for very professional photographers, or an old Bakelite Viewmaster, three-dimensional video. Nowadays, you can do 3 dimensions on your phone if you put a little Viewmaster-like device on it, you know? So so that's the quaint collectible tech. And then that works for smartwatches too. So what smartwatches represented a dead end in technology? Maybe you'd wind up with one of them, like those old calculator watches. But they have their own niche unto themselves that are extremely collectible. Those old first generation calculator computer watches from the old computer companies from Silicon Valley, those are worth a lot of money. They're extremely collectible, you know? So there are a lot of different ways that tech can be collectible, or like obsolete technology, almost pre-obsolete. I have two examples of pre-obsolete technology. These are I'm a lucky guy being a tech journalist. That's why I get to see this stuff. These are two pieces of technology that were designed, developed, commercialized, and were literally crushed under the iPod. This is data play. You can Google it. Data play. Oops, upside down. It was a 250 gig per side megabyte, sorry, megabyte, 250 megabyte aside optical rewritable disk. And this was magnetic. And this was a basically they had made I actually wrote it on here for 40 megabytes, right? Because it wasn't, I had to ask him and I wrote it on the back, 40 megabytes back in the day. So this is a 40 megabyte drive that was meant for music, and this was a 250 megabyte drive that was meant for music, and they both were destroyed and crushed under the massive iPod advance because portable storage cannot compete with virtual storage, which is an aspect I didn't see in my book Cyberchild, in my first and hopefully not my only novel. I'm working on the second one. I've been working on the second one for over a decade, but I'm a busy man. But I talked about everyone having a ubiquitous digital identity, but I had said in the book that people carried it on like a little key fob or a dongle or something, whereas in reality, it's that the philosophical aspect of what I was talking about is true. In the future, we are in the future. We do all have identities in the ether, as it were, but it's a virtual. You log into Google in any computer and you go boop boop boop. It's me. You can see all of your stuff on any computer anywhere in the world. So that aspect is true, but the mechanism is what I didn't see back then. But then my book came out in 2006, and it took me a while to write that one to begin with anyway. So we're talking 20 years ago. I didn't even think about the virtual world, and a lot of people didn't either, which is why I don't feel badly saying that I was also one who didn't see it. But then again, you look at technologies that come and go, and for all the technologies I've seen that never worked out, like I've seen some stuff people trying to talk about. I've been pitched on multiple occasions of over unity power devices, which is another word for perpetual motion. I see all kinds of crazy stuff as a tech editor, but some of it's legit, and some of it I see and I discredit, and it turns out to be real. Like I didn't think cameras on cell phones were a big thing. I'm like, cameras on cell phones, but I was a photographer, and I always had a camera, and I always thought of photography as device oriented, and the average person doesn't. So putting a phone in a camera is giving people an opportunity to share things, which is what it turned out to be. And I misread that completely. Another thing I misread completely, and I still kick myself today, is as a tech journalist, I heard about Bitcoin when it was so new, I could have mined it on my laptop, and I didn't. And that's why I live in a one-room apartment. Oh, but so I would put smartwatches in that area of tech collecting. And if that watch represents something special, like for example, maybe the first Tag Heuer smartwatch would be a collectible, but not because it's a smartwatch, but because it was Tag Heuer's first smartwatch, something along those lines. You know what I mean? Let's look at some of the comments. I've noticed that it's been scrolling along, so I got to go back up and let's look at some of these comments. I love reading all of your comments, as I've said many times. It's the community that I love that makes this channel. The Vince. Oh, hey, SmackDaddy from Australia. Hey, from Wiesbaden. And JDF Omega, my friend. Nice to see you as well. The Vince. I had a Garmin watch. It was 45 mil wide. That's wide. Well, I mean, my Breitling Navitimer is that wide, but it's a Navitimer. 45 wide and felt more like a chore to charge it. The notifications were turned off. It just told me what I already knew. I know if I'm active or not, LOL. Although I must admit, since I've gotten my smart ring, I've walked a lot more. I know this. I'm more active because now that I know that somebody's watching, even if it's only me, but at least now that I know I'm paying attention to it, I can't ignore it, right? So I walk more and all that other. Just bought a rowing machine. What are you gonna do? So I don't deny the functionality of smart devices. I'm just frankly, I did wait for a smart ring. I knew that they were coming, and I just figured one day they'll be, and as soon as they came out, I bought one. And I both love and hate that I bought it because I love that I have that information, but I hate the fact that I have that information. And I love the fact that I'm able to wear the watches I love to wear, and I still can keep track of my steps and my sleep and my heart rate and all that other fancy ass stuff. I just recently bought this for those of you who are into the jewelry side of this industry. I just picked this beautiful piece of turquoise braceletry up because I wanted to get something to match this Persian ring I recently picked up, because the signet ring that some of you may have seen me wear, it fell one too many times on a hard surface and it chipped the stone. And so I put it into storage because I don't want it to get any more damaged. So I had to buy something else, and I thought this was nice, interesting, and dramatic. And if you're going to wear jewelry. And so I bought this beautiful piece, and it's like I said, this Persian has some really beautiful detailing in it and handmade. Just very pleased with it. And so, you know, I know a lot of people who are into watches are also into jewelry. Some who are into watches are not into jewelry at all. Butters, I understand the appeal, and for a lot of people, the need. I'm just an analog guy in a digital world. Well, what I say to a lot of people is if you're wearing the smartwatch to track your jogging or to work, then wear it for that. And then when you finish your day and you're about to head out to the bar, when you're off the clock, put on a clock. And then that way, you're not okay. You miss if you're worried about not catching all of your steps, then you're not wearing it for the right reason. You know you've already been active and you've done all of your stuff. Wear a watch just to be casual, to be off the grid in one sense. They don't know Apple doesn't know how often you scratch your ass, you know? So when you're off the clock, wear a clock. If you want to wear a smartwatch during the day, wear a smartwatch during the day. Happy hour then comes out to Snoopy. You can have both. You can wear a smartwatch during office hours and then switch over to that old Tag Heuer or Rado or Bulova or Rolex in the evening, you know? And if you want to track your sleep, put the smartwatch back on before you go to bed. You know, you change your clothes to go to bed. Why not change your watch? Or to go out, change your watch. Watch is an accessory to at this point, I mean, because you can get your time from anywhere. You're wearing the watch, it's a part of you, it's a part of your expression, you know? Make it reflect that more. Um, SmackDaddy. I agree. Eric, before collecting I wore plenty of smartwatches, Sonys and Samsungs. I do have one Samsung in my collection, but I primarily wear a Fitbit on the opposite arm of my mechanical quartz watch. Well, see, now you can switch over to a ring. I recognize then you'd have to dump your old tech and buy new tech. But when you get to the point when you want to replace the Fitbit for a newer device, get a ring, and then you're not double wristing, you can put a bracelet on or something like that. Uh, hey, Chris, I said hi already, but that's okay. I'll say hi twice to you, my friend. You were with me. Chris was with me when I bought the bracelet for this in Frankfurt. Chris says they call it watch for marketing and lack of a better word that consumers would understand easily. You're absolutely right. A good example would be when the lighting industry was shifting from fluorescence and incandescence to LED. Fluorescent lights use a different power than a regular incandescent. Like a light bulb just runs off of current. You know, the wire gets hot. But a fluorescent has a different thing. It actually has, it needs a separate electronic starter and maintainer to run it at the right voltage to have it do the thing that makes the gas glow, that sets off the UV, that turns on the phosphor that makes the light. And they call that piece of extra electronics in they used to, well, I mean, if you still have a fluorescent light today, they call that the ballast. And when LED replacements for fluorescent lights came out, they called those power supplies ballasts, even though they weren't ballasts. They were just power supplies for LEDs. But since they were designed for a specific market, they called them what fit the market so that the people who were buying them would know what they were buying. And so that's why they call smart wearable devices on your wristwatches, because where you wear a watch. So I agree with you. Oh, Nanad. Hey, Nanad and Hannibal. Hi. Nanad, people are changing a smartwatch every year or two, just like a phone. I don't think smartwatches will get collectible. Oh, and thank you, Nanad, for the tip. Um, Well, like I said, I think smartwatches are collectible within the context of collectible technology. Like the biggest reason this is collectible is because it's old and quaint. It's an old ohm-meter. So this one device does a function that is like 1,000th of the functionality of a modern device, because this does one thing and a modern engineering measuring device does thousand things. But isn't it cool? It becomes a nice doorstop or a bookshelf bookend or so. It's just I just have it because I'm in the engineering business. Oh, which reminds me, there it is. The latest issue of Power Electronics magazine. I'm the editor in chief of the IEEE's Power Electronics magazine. I love this cover. That's the CERN accelerator because we have the cover content is converters for high voltage and high power applications, which ties a little bit into what I was just saying, but not much. But what the heck's, a little bit of promotion for the IEEE. But antique tech. But then that also drifts into the watch world, right? Bulova Accutron. This is straight up both, both technology collectible and horology collectible. The first true electronic watch wound up in a lot of NASA space missions. A couple on Mercury on the wrist, but mostly on the dashboards because it could be driven with a current. And that's a perfect example of both tech and horological collectability. So I would say the first generation smartwatches are going to be collectible in the sense that they represent, eras in horology, and so they're collectible in that sense. But they're not going to be collectible because the crystal or the microcontroller, that was the microcontroller that year for the microcontroller. Ooh, boy, what a microcontroller! No, they're not going to be collecting smartwatches for that reason. They're going to be collecting them because they represent antique technology, quaint aspects, dead ends that are interesting because they're dead ends, like liquid crystal on silicon. There are a lot of ways that you can frame smartwatches that they become collectible, but they'll never, in my mind as well, and obviously it's a little bit resonated with the crowd, but I don't believe smartwatches will ever be collectible as watches. Some of the hybrid pieces maybe, because for example, Frederic Constant has some hybrid pieces that are smartwatches with mechanical innards, or you could say mechanical watches with smartwatch functionality. Some of those hybrid pieces, for example, are collectible. I would say if I had that kind of a collection and I really wanted to be very comprehensive, I would have to have a hybrid piece like one of the Frederic Constant digital mechanical watches. That is a legitimate collectible in my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion. So that's a good example in my mind of a smartwatch that is also a collectible horological watch. But because of the fact that it is a hybrid piece, just like spring drive will always be a area of interest in horology because it's a truly hybrid movement, like the old oyster quartz, um, a hybrid movement, a fusion of both mechanical and electronic in an elegant manner. So there are going to be some exceptions in smartwatch collecting. Let's see, do we have any other? Oh yeah, here's another good example of some old tech. I have an old reel-to-reel 4-inch, right? So we're talking this holds maybe what, 3.5, 4 minutes of music? But the reason that 3.5 minutes was the original length of a song was because that was the original length of the old 78 RPM and the old Victrola, the old Edison cylinder. So that was all they could record back in the day. So everybody got used to making music that long every time, and that's stayed to this day. We're guided by the dead hands of engineers, and so this had just enough tape. You could put like 2, maybe 3 songs on this. But whoever owned this, they were rocking it though. They were loving it. They were the only people who had music at the beach. Ding ding ding. I mean, you had to plug the headphones in. Didn't have its own speaker, but you plug those headphones in, you got some music there. Although you can tell it's getting so old, the band's starting to stretch a little bit. But, old tech. I mean, old tech is collectible, right? In a world full of smart cameras and stuff, who would have an old camera? At a certain point, tech becomes collectible because it becomes quaint, it becomes interesting, it becomes rare. And there's a mix that changes with the market and tastes over time. Some things are cool now, some things won't be cool until then, and some of the things that are cool now won't be cool then. It all depends on how people look at stuff, you know? Craig, hey, you're welcome to come though. Um, Miranda, hey, Miranda. Arthur, Arthur Morgan. I think I said hi, but I'll say hi again. I've recently bought a 41 Longines Conquest in black, an underrated piece. It is. You're absolutely right. I've got a Longines triple date moon phase. I really love it. I really do. It's a nice piece. Longines is well. The thing is, Longines wasn't always underrated. Once upon a time, Longines was very highly respected, and now it's respected, but it's not highly respected. Although they do support a lot of equestrian events, so I'm assuming horse people may have a higher opinion of Longines than some of the other communities. But I like Longines. Absolutely love it. Thinking of getting the Legend Diver. Get the GMT. The Longines GMT Diver is awesome. The Conquest Diver is awesome. It really is. The diver is really nice. The Longines GMT Diver, I would buy it tomorrow if I didn't have too many damn watches right now. And I just pulled the trigger. I just pulled the trigger on a JLC Polaris Chrono because I had the JLC triple hander, the three hander, the automatic, but I never was happy with the leather strap it came on. And I didn't want to spend 2,200 euros on a metal, and I sold it. But this one's on a metal, and the Chrono, I always thought the Chrono was a cooler watch, but I didn't have the budget. The JLC Chrono's thinner than the Daytona. Nice watch, but the Longines is a wonderful, wonderful piece. Warren, my watch is my jewelry. Exactly. You gotta, enjoy your jewelry. You gotta enjoy your jewelry. Have fun with your. You only threw this planet once. There's only one ride in the garden that we can take. The squirrel ride looks interesting, but we can't fit in the cars. There's only one time we get. You might as well enjoy yourself. You might as well. I don't wear the skull because I'm a badass. I wear it as a memento mori. Reminder that we are all mortal. And I got this at a craft booth at a Wiesbaden fair. It's a lapis with some really interesting metal inclusions. And this is a Persian turquoise, smart ring, and Native American. I also have a Mexican silver bracelet. Some people you may have seen on other episodes, but jewelry, you might as well enjoy jewelry. How long are you on the planet? I wear a little diamond stud. Sometimes I wear a silver hoop, no, white gold hoop, because you don't want it, you want something hypoallergenic. Uh, Arthur. Hey, Arthur. My jewelry game is as strong as my watch. Oh, thank you, my friend. I love how cool my rings and bracelets and necklaces. Aw, so nice. Oh, I forget the necklaces. I'm only doing the two little chains, but two silver chains. That's all. Just something just to just show I have a little. I don't want to be Mister. You know, the rapper with the silver painted midget around his neck. Or little person. My apologies. But there's actually a video showing a rapper with that kind of gaudy stuff. I believe in having strong jewelry, but not loud jewelry. You know what I mean? That it makes a statement, but isn't like, because I've seen some skull rings that are really out there. Oh, but thank you, Arthur. I appreciate that. Butters, that turquoise wrist candy is very nice. Thank you. So, dude, not in your face, you're colorful. Like, wow. I'm so glad someone else said what I just said, so it wasn't like I was saying it based on what they had said. But yeah, like I said, I like strong jewelry, but not loud jewelry. Arthur, that's a fantastic cover. Thank you. Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Hey, my friend, collectible like a Commodore 64. Well, an old Commodore 64 is a reasonably collectible device because and it will become more collectible the farther we go into the future because it'll become rarer and rarer. So I would say by 2050, a Commodore 64 would be something you could put in a glass cabinet in your living room, and people, especially if you had a past in old computers and maybe even dealt with one when you were a young person, then people would say, "Hey, like just like me and the where did I put that stupid portfolio? Ah, isn't that funny? Oh well, it magically disappeared. But my Atari Portfolio, which I was just showing. I've been sitting here the whole time. It didn't magically disappear. Huh, isn't that interesting? But that is weird, though, that I just had it in my hand and uh, I'll live. But then again, like I said, to go back to older tech, they never fielded this tech, you know? That's what makes this collectible. They never fielded this tech. That's why it's collectible. They fielded this tech, and it was once very ubiquitous, but now that it's rare, because like this is a Bakelite, the first plastic. So this is a really old ViewMaster, and that's why it's collectible. Now, I wouldn't say a modern. If you had like a ViewMaster from like the 70s, one of those bright red ones, but still in the box, that becomes more collectible because if you get that old tech and you're able to have it in an pristine condition, that makes it more collectible as well. I mean, think about how much a new GI Joe in the box from the 70s would be worth. Several hundred, I would say, probably a couple $1,000s now. And like I was saying before, going back to things like antique cameras, this is about as useful today. Well, actually, there are artists that still use it because you get a big chunk of film in there with you get really good grain. So, as I've often said, one man's fish is another man's poisson. It's still weird. I don't know where I put that. Oh, no, it's not down there. That's weird as heck. I don't know where I put that dang portfolio. Oh well, I'll live. But yeah, so when we talk about collectible and collectible technology, there are a lot of variables, market issues. Like I said, what's hot and interesting today may not be hot and interesting tomorrow. What's going to be hot and interesting tomorrow may not be hot and interesting today. What did they say in Indiana Jones, right? You see this pocket watch, if I cover it in sand for 1,000 years, it'll become invaluable. Scarcity is part of the value equation. That's why some of the watch companies that we all love and know, some of them deal with exclusivity as part of their value equation. Yeah, we can make more of this, but we only making 100 so the people who have it can feel special and are willing to pay then to feel special because they have this special edition that we could make a lot of and don't. But then there are companies who have special editions and they make a lot of the special editions and then they get crapped on, like Omega, for making a lot of special editions. And then there are companies that make limited editions that 5 guys get and nobody gives them a hard time about it. Why not? It doesn't have to be limited in, like, who can have it. It could be limited in, we're only gonna make it for a year, or we're only gonna have it for this period of time, or, there are ways to make something exclusive without, really, really ignoring your base. Because but then again, watch collectors aren't really the base of the industry. Consumers are the base of the industry. The watch industry, to a greater or lesser extent, considers watch collectors a nuisance, a useful nuisance sometimes, but they don't want Patek Philippe doesn't want my money. I'm a collector. If I manage to get my hands on one, I'm get it at a discount. They want the guy flying through duty free in Dubai to drop 50K on one. You know, we don't they don't care about us collectors. So if you going back to our topic about collecting smartwatches, or are they even worth collecting? You you're not gonna be collecting them for the residuals, so you'll be collecting them for their merit. Why are they worth collecting? Were they the first? Were they the best? Were they interesting? Were they limited edition? Did they have some aspect that others did not, like hybrid mechanical smartwatches? You know what I mean? What are your thoughts? Let's look at the comments. HRM. Hey, HRM. Someone should harvest radium from old pocket watch dials and make a nuclear wristwatch with it. You wouldn't get fission. It would just be really dangerous. You could probably make a radioactive battery, the kind like the pacemaker, old school pacemakers used to use. But I think they worked on alpha particles. I forget. It's been a long time since I thought about my embedded medical technology. I used to run Medical Design Technology magazine while I was editorial director. A lot of stuff going on in the body today, electronically. But yeah, radium, you could probably make a battery, but it wouldn't be worth the effort. I know you're joking, though. Elusive Man, doesn't Tag have a smartwatch? Yes. I've seen some brands do smartwatches, don't know much about them. Well, that's the thing. So the first smartwatch from a major brand might be a collectible product, but to a greater and lesser extent, um, smartwatches are just electronic consumer products, right? And an electronic consumer product has a half-life of the development cycle of the next generation, right? So you got a 3 or 4 generation old phone. Like I have the Z Fold 3, the Z Fold 7's coming out now. I'm probably going to hold on to mine for a while longer because it's not a cheap device. But the moment it acts up on me, I'm going to switch over because I'm several generations behind. But that's the thing. When I stop using that phone, I'm not going to collect it like, ooh, let me hold on to it. I might collect it in like throw it in a drawer and forget about it, collect it. There's nothing more dated than obsolete consumer technology. So, no, as I said before, I don't believe smart watches are collectible as watches. They may be collectible as technology, which is a different set of criteria. So, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, will Rolex make a Fitbit on Oyster Flex? No, I don't believe so. Arthur, I have a Tissot T-Touch. Oh, see, that's a nice watch. The Tissot T-Touch Connect is a nice watch, and it's nice and all, but I don't really see myself choosing it over any of my mechanical watches. Exactly. So when you move on from the T-Touch, you might keep it as part of your collection just because you can. That makes a milestone because you wore it for a while. You have a connection to it. That puts a different spin on it as well. You can say, "Oh yeah, this T-Touch, I wore it for all these years, and I had a great service from this." So it then becomes part of your personal collection that you have a personal affiliation with, you know. And it's a transition smart device before they start putting them in our brains like Futurama, painfully. Trap Vision, hey, hey, Eric, SmackDaddy. At least all those collectible. Oh, scroll too far. At least all those collectible old gadgets I showed can still be used, but smartwatches are bound by software, and once they stop updating, they will be bricks. You are absolutely right to a degree because the batteries that they make don't make batteries that fit this anymore. Technology does wander on in certain senses. Um, this is usable, but no longer a real application for it, doing your light meter thingy. So I get what you're saying, though. I mean, if I had an old data play machine, it would still play music, but They aren't making any new discs of this. They didn't make very many in the first place. Oh, but I understand exactly what you're saying, Smack Daddy. HRM. I'd be interested in a smartwatch if they could guarantee upgrades in the end. Well, see, that's the problem. The software is also related to the hardware. If you have better software, you're going to need better microcontrollers, better processors, better power circuitry to power those There has to be a next generation device to support the next generation software. So, yeah, no, I get you there. But they can't guarantee that because it's cheaper to just give you a new watch. That's why, um, in my humble opinion, in the future, everything will be services based. So when you sign up for T-Mobile or whatever, you get a free phone or a free watch or a free ring or whatever the hell you want. And the money comes out of the fees for your services, and the hardware is going to become transparent eventually, in my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion. But that'll be a while because we live in too much of a well, it's not so much we live in a consumer society, but we haven't gotten the people used to the idea that things are transient and software is real. Oh, Dr. Bob's nightmare. A brick has to be really old before it gets collectible. This is absolutely true. Like I said, the only reason this is collectible because it's old and rare. These used to be a diamond. You could probably once upon a time you could probably find one of these lying on a street corner and not bother to pick it up, like an old CRT television. There was a time when you could literally pick up any TV you wanted from the street because the transition to LCD, people would put perfectly functional televisions on the street. You could pick up a 29-inch, a 36-inch. You could pick up any television you wanted off the street. Any. And just last month, I'm at my daughter's, and my son-in-law, who's an IT guy and he's a gamer, he has a 19-inch Sony Trinitron now in his living room, and I'm like, "Why do you have this old television set?" It's because he got his hands on an old PlayStation or some old gaming device, and he wanted to play it on an old vintage television set. So, boom, there you go. That Sony Trinitron flat screen CRT television is now a collectible because at one point they flooded them. You could literally pick one up off the street, but because of their ubiquity, they're all gone now. And so now the ones that are left are rare, which is such a weird, just that's the thing about if you had walked up to someone and pointed at a TV set that was literally sitting on the street in a stack of TV sets and saying, 20 years from now, someone's going to want money for that. They'd have laughed in your face. Times change, things change, desires change. Like I said, what's hot today may not be hot tomorrow, and what will be hot tomorrow may not be hot today. Ah, I still have Miranda. You still have your retard part. Like I said, it's so weird. I had my portfolio here. I showed it to everybody, folded it up, put it down, and I literally don't know where the heck I put the dang thing, but I've been sitting here all this time. It can't be outside of my arm's reach, and it's not here. Isn't that weird? That's all right. It'll turn up somewhere, slip through the space-time continuum. Oh well. But yeah, I was showing my Atari Portfolio earlier. It's very cool you still have yours. That's a collectible piece of technology. Butters. To Dr. Bob's. That Rolex comment's gonna haunt me till it happens. Miranda, with the parallel interface and the chess card. I had the parallel interface, I didn't have the chess card. Nice. Viewmaster. Aditya, hey. I know this is a bit off topic, but I've been wondering what do we have today that has the same muted, gorgeous blue dial like the Universal Genève White Shadow? Well, like I said, I just put in an order for a JLC Polaris blue chrono. I love the color of that, and I know it's really hard. I mean, I was having a chat with Lederer, Bernhard Lederer, and he does blue, and he's got a couple of watches that he goes out of his way to do different blue tints. And blue is such a fascinating color that there are so many different shades of it, and they're all blue, but they're all different. Miranda, my dad makes a great amount adding to his pension dealing with analog vintage cameras. Well, because as old as this is still functional. You put a piece of film in it and push the button, it'll make a picture. Mechanical, mechanical. But yeah, the you look in, and basically this is what they call a double lens reflex. You look through this lens, and this is the lens that takes the picture, but you want a lens as similar to the lens you're taking the picture, so you make sure that what you're seeing is what the camera is seeing. And a single lens reflex has a mirror inside, and that's the single lens cameras we have that are mechanical. Today's digital cameras don't have a mirror inside because you don't have to worry about splitting the view between your view and the film's view, as it were. But yeah. Old school film camera, open up you know, you put the film inside. So if I put a piece, I don't even need the factory film. I could cut a piece of film that I prepared myself with silver iodide chemicals and make a picture with this camera 100 years from now. I don't need factory film. I just need to put a piece of photosensitive material in here, and this will take a picture. And I'll be able to use this camera, maybe not this camera, to take a picture. But if I put a fresh piece of tape in here and a battery, this would definitely record some sound at 40 dB signal to noise ratio. But as long as there's a battery in this, it'll keep perfect time. Talk about watch and tech collectible. So let's go through the comments. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to close out, but I want to make sure I got all the comments. Aditya, Rolex comes closest but expensive for me. Other brands make more sportier watches. Well, Rolex's big thing is their watches are a little on the conservative side because they're trying for very classic designs that'll last a long time, and they've been successful at that. Gian, hey, I'm sorry you got here late. Glad to catch this much. I'm glad you came in before we had to roll out. Eric, Miranda, electronics with surface mount are not collectibles in my opinion. Oh, has to be all through hole for you, and I guess. Okay. Well, then that means this would definitely work for you. This would definitely work for you. Ain't nothing surface mount in here. Frankly, there's nothing surface mount in here either. Which, for those of you who don't know what surface mount means, if you have like a capacitor or a resistor or some component on the circuit board, in the oldie timey days, they would drill holes in the board, and there would be wires that would stick through those holes, and then they would solder those points. Today, they just put solder pads, and the device just sits on it, and the electrodes are just pad to pad, so there's no through hole. They're just surface mount. That's what he was saying. So surface mount's all modern electronics. Gian, never got any of those high-end tag horror smartwatches. I've seen one in real life, and I'd rather get a G-Shock. Way to go. JDF Omega, hey. I have so many collectibles of all sorts of stuff. Where do you find the room? I barely have room. But like I said, I'm a lucky man. I've been a tech journalist for a long time. I got a chance to get my hands on a lot of really cool and quaint technology. I'm a very lucky guy. Like I said, or just something like this. This is if they had known what they were giving me, they never would have given it to me. But when they gave it to me, they were I got this at CES. I was at their suite at the Bellagio, and everything was under confidentiality, so I can't even to this day say any of what was there. But then I said, "Can I have one?" And they gave me the Lucite, but they weren't thinking because they never commercialized it. So I'm holding about $2 billion of research. No kidding. There's an easy $2 billion of research here because we're not just talking about a chip. You see, it's on a carrier. There's a circuit board. This was a finished product, and they never fielded it. So this is $2 billion in the hole, which is why this is collectible. It's in a little lucite shaped like an old rear projection television. That was the application at the time. This was in uh, attempted to field. Rear projection television was the big thing at the time, and Texas Instruments DLP, their micromirror technology, which is still used today because it's superior in a lot of ways, even though it is in, intuitively you would think that a mechanical technology would be inferior to a completely solid state technology, but the mechanical technology had and has a much wider tolerance range, so it makes assembly easier, and you have to assemble in order to sell. And liquid crystalline silicon, the precision needed in installation, because it was a completely flat device, had to be mounted perfectly or it wouldn't work right. And perfect never happens. The Six Sigma 1 million, 1 in a million faults isn't enough when you're making hundreds of thousands of devices of this nature with millions of features and the like. It just wound up not being commercially viable, and so that's why this is collectible. If this had been a commercial technology, it would be collectible as well, but just collectible as an old school, "Oh, look at this cute old piece of promotional stuff." But it's inherently more collectible because it represents a technology that was never properly fielded in the field, in the marketplace. But like I said, there are smartwatches that fall into those categories as well, so you can use those categories and collect smartwatches. But then you'd be collecting them as examples of technology, not as examples of horology. Elusive Man, the Tissot Hybrid, exactly. SmackDaddy, the Trinitron was the magnum opus. Yes, yes, I agree. At the peak, I had a 36-inch Vega, 265 pounds. But yeah, 36-inch flat screen CRT, right at the cusp of the transition. I think I gave it away because we had at the time when the transition, those things were became, talk about becoming valueless in a heartbeat. That 36-inch Trinitron, when flat screens came out to be worth literally zero. Interesting. And now though, because they all disappeared, if you had an old one, it's collectible now because there aren't any around. Trap Vision. I have a working Nintendo and Genesis. Wow. The portfolio was used in Terminator 2. That's right, when he stole from the money machine. Chris, Alex, and chat, good day and good night. And actually, that's a great point to end. Live long and prosper. Take care, everyone. I love you all. Have a fantastic week. And most importantly, have a fantastic evening.